Ja, velkomni gestir. Í dag ætlum við að heyra frá Fulbright-fræðimanni sem hefur verið hér á Íslandi seinustu mánuði. Viðburður fer fram á ensku og mun ég skipta yfir. Welcome guest, introduction in Icelandic. I welcome you to this Fulbright forum. We are also live on Zoom for those who can't be here in person, and we are recording just for everyone's information. We'll be taking questions after the presentation. So those who are joining us virtually, if you want to ask questions, we ask you to write them in the chat in the Zoom. For those who are here in person, we'll have some refreshment after the presentation. So for that, the scholar presenting today is one of our Fulbright National Science Foundation Arctic scholars. As many of you know, the Commission has been building up an Arctic program in cooperation with partners in this field, and one of them is the National Science Foundation in the US. And we've been bringing a lot of scholars and fellows from the US here to Iceland to conduct research in both the natural and social sciences. So today we'll shine a spotlight on one of our Fulbright-NSF Arctic researchers. So let's give a warm welcome to Fulbright-NSF Arctic research scholar, Dr. Aaron Kennedy, who's visiting us from the University of North Dakota, where he is an associate professor of atmospheric sciences. He's hosted here in Iceland by the Icelandic Met Office and has spent this winter in the Westfjords of Iceland, living in Hnífsdalur. So we know he's been using his time here to the fullest, and we look forward to hear what he has to say. So give the word to Aaron.
I'm gonna get the.
Yeah.
There we go. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. You saw the title of my Fulbright project, but the other, it's like on automatic. What's going on here? There shouldn't be any settings for time. Okay, maybe I hit something on accident. Anyway, I thought the other appropriate title for my presentation is Wild Westfjords, because it was quite wild. And it was an amazing experience. This picture here is actually showing part of the project. These are snow fences on Avalanche, which is a mountain above Flatterry, which has suffered a number of avalanches. And we're looking at whether these fences were doing their job and how much they're reducing the amount of blowing snow. And so what's interesting is I went from the prairie to the mountains. North Dakota, where we're at in the eastern part, is extremely flat. Iceland, where I was at, was not. And so this little arrow down here, that's Hnífsdalur, that's where I was living. And there's literally just trails right out the back door. Like in a minute, you could be out hiking and having fun. And basically, once you're out in the open in Westfjords, you just hike wherever you want, and you just respect people's property if it's out there. And it's an amazing area to just sort of disconnect from the world when you're not working. So why did I end up here? What's interesting is some things are the same. And so on the left, you see a video of me launching a weather balloon in a blizzard in Minnesota, like right on the border of North Dakota. And then on the right is a blizzard that we had, it's very touchy, blizzard that we had in Hnífsdalur. Okay, you guys see the video. Got me hit it once. There we go. So for those that don't know, we had a lot of really high winds in Westfjords this year. I mean, you had high winds down here too, so that's Iceland for you. But we had like basically hurricane force winds, and that's a blizzard, and that redistributes snow. And the question is, how does this impact avalanches? And so the objectives for my project, like overreaching, is I've been finding myself doing more like high latitude research, and I've also been developing my own instruments. And so I wanted to go to an Arctic climate where I could see nature in action, because our eyes are our first instrument that we use. And I wanted to see how my instruments behave in a location that's very different than North Dakota. Then even better, if you think about like what my research is, at its core is about natural hazards research. And so improving forecasts, improving understanding of things like blizzards, blowing snow, and so on. And in West Fjords, the stuff impacts avalanches. I knew nothing about mountains and avalanches, and so I thought this was a great way to sort of expand my knowledge base, and even better, see if my instruments might be able to make an impact here. And so if you went to my actual proposal document, I had 3 objectives. One was basically installing and maintaining and doing analysis of observations around Iceland, which is where there's Avalanche office is located. And then looking at some analysis of blowing snow and some of their other instruments. And then the other thing was visualizing and analyzing radar data from a radar that's supposed to be installed. That got delayed, and so we didn't get to that yet. And for the sake of time, I'm just going to talk about this first one because there's so much to talk about. And so just to sort of describe where I am and where I was hanging out for the year, here's Iceland. West Fjords is the far northwest corner, is possibly one of the greatest places to visit as a tourist because there's not many tourists. They've actually been spending a lot of time like marketing and trying to get people up there. It's off the ring road. And so if you want that sort of classic Iceland experience where you're not fighting for toilets and the shot of the waterfall without anybody in it, West Fjords is the place to go. I mean, there is one trip we took to Dinyandi, which is the big waterfall there, and we were literally the only people there. Like, that's crazy. It's like one of the most, like, probably one of the greatest waterfalls in Iceland, and we're the only people there. And like, how many times could say that in this country? And so I was living in Nifstalis, a house we rented there, and then most of the work is happening in Eastville, which is the spit of land in this fjord. And so that's where the work office is. And I actually picked this location because I like bike commuting. I thought, oh, it's only a couple kilometers or miles back and forth. It'd be a great opportunity to be able to keep up my bike commuting. And then for my research, there's this town of Longavik, which is over here. This used to be, well, there's still a radar station up here, but the U.S. military had a location up here. So there was a lot of stuff developed for that, but also it's a big fishing village. And there's also a dairy in that area. And so we had a weather station located below this mountain that I installed these snowflake cameras that I developed. And then the other site of interest is this Erdefet, which I mentioned, which overlooks Flat Dairy, where they had a lot of avalanches. And so they had these snow fences, and they had some instrumentation, I had some instrumentation. And we basically got together and came up with a science experiment that we could run to see, how much are the snow fences impacting snowdrift. And so in the first 3 weeks, Wild West Fjords lived up to its name. The first day I decided to bike commute, we had like hurricane force winds. This is like basically, it looks like almost like a tornado of sea spray. The winds are coming down, those downslope winds off the mountains and coming out in these eddies and making these tornado looking vortices, which as a meteorologist excited me quite a bit. I think I probably took 20 minutes to get on my bike just because I'm like, oh, look at that, it's so cool. And then in town, it was sort of chaos. There was boats breaking loose of their moorings and crashing on shore, and the search and rescue was out there like trying to rescue these ships and save them. And then there was a student at the University Center of West Fjords who like got blown off their bike and got seriously injured. It was just a crazy day, and I was like, wow, is this common? Like, how often are the winds like this? And like, oh, this is actually pretty rare. I mean, it happens, but don't expect this like weekly. And then a week after that, then we had the polar bear incident. And so this is also fairly rare, but every couple of years or so, a polar bear finds its way from Greenland to here. And in this case, it happened to come ashore and hang out by the summer home, like 1 fjord over from where we lived. So I think like basically from where the polar bear to where our house was only like 10, 15 miles, which that's probably the closest I've ever been to polar bear. I hope so, at least. And then a week after that, roughly, then there was a tour bus fire. And so we have these tunnels that allow you to get into where we live. And one of these tour buses from like a bunch of cruise passengers caught fire. Luckily, they got out of the tunnel. And then this like burnt out hulk of the bus sat there for a couple months, just as like I don't know, like a warning or something. But I was like, man, this place is so wild. There's like stuff always happening. There's like crazy stuff. And this led to a lot of discussion of like, hey, we need better tunnels and stuff. This is actually, it could have been really bad, to be honest. And the question is, where do you get the money to actually make the tunnels better, make everything safer? But I digress. work was also adventure. And so we're putting instruments on top of the mountain. And so there's this old trail that they actually developed to get the fences built up there. And we took an ATV up there to install the instrumentation. And then this is a picture of actually looking down at Flattery, and you can see these protective walls that they've built for the avalanches. And what's interesting is even fairly recently they had an avalanche go up and over the wall, partially buried a house. No one was seriously hurt, thankfully. And they're actually building more protections than they're trying to slow down the avalanches further. And so the question is, are these snow fences slowing the snow down so you're not accumulating a lot of snow where it would eventually potentially form into an avalanche? But it made for a very pretty work environment. And so we finished the installs in October. By that time, we had got our first snowfall on top of the mountains. These are what the stations look like. There's basically two sensors mounted one above each other. And that's because as snow accumulates, one will get buried and you will always have observations. Here's a picture of the snow fence. And once again, it was like, it's work, but can you really complain? It's like adventuring and work all in one. It was quite amazing. So what did we get from this instrumentation? This is just, there's so much on this plot, we don't have to really talk about the details, but those red strips indicate warm periods. And so we actually had a pretty abnormal winter with a lot of warm-ups. It basically snow, and then it'd warm up, and then it would melt, and it would happen over and over. And what's interesting is these sensors that we installed, it's basically a microphone, and when particles hit it, it tells you like how much is hitting it. But it turns out that rain makes that same signal if it's wind-driven rain as snow. And so if we were to actually look at how much snowdrift accumulated over the year, it turned out that the fences had a lot, like the instrument behind the fences had a lot more snowdrift than the one out in the exposed location. It was the exact opposite of what we thought we would find. And I was like, that doesn't seem right. And so we started looking at the data, and it turned out that because of these warm-ups of these rain events, that was a huge signal in the data. We basically had to remove it to remove the noise because the rain is not contributing to blowing snow. And it also had like life impacts. And so there was one day, like the one perhaps hard part of adjusting living here is like the bus schedule for Zoe to go to school and back. It was like, I feel like it took a month for us to figure out like how the bus worked. And it seemed like most of the people that drove the bus were Polish. So they didn't really know, I guess they were learning Icelandic, but they didn't really have great English either. And there was like times when Zoe just sort of like dropped off wherever, and she's like, "Dad, I need help." And so one day she's like, "Dad, the bus didn't show up." I'm like, "Okay." I was taking some work meetings at home, so I hop in the car to go around the mountain, and then here's this line of traffic, and then you kind of squint down and like, "Oh, the road's gone." All that rain melted the snow. There was a mudslide, and the road was blocked. But you know, one of the take-home messages from this is just how friendly and welcoming and everybody is in Iceland. And so I called up my work colleagues, and Zoe ended up having basically a slumber party at Heather's house, and then Steph came over, and I think she had a lot of fun. Yeah. And so then finally when the roads opened a day later, we were able to go get her, and now she has a story about the day she got trapped in town because of a mudslide. So it was interesting that like these events that were impacting my data also impacted our life. And so here's what the snow fences look like in the winter. One of the challenges is just trying to figure out like how high the snow is getting. And so I had to sort of rely on different ways. They had one of the workers at the office was flying a drone. They got images, but sometimes it'd be hard to spot the stations. So we could see some of them. You can see, oh, this sensor's about half drifted over. I also use some satellite imagery just trying to keep an eye on like what the snowdrift patterns look like around the snow fences. And basically, to make a long story short, what we found out is, you know, during this year, most of their winds, this is a wind rose, it just shows how common are the winds from different directions. And so this means the winds are coming from the northeast. That's climatologically pretty normal for the area. And then there's a bunch from the southwest. The southerly component is actually pretty rare. So this was the weird thing about this winter. But then if you basically compare the sensors that were protected by the snow fence to those that didn't, we found out that in the direction of the snow fence, there's a lot less snowdrift. So this is like how much snowdrift was occurring. And roughly for the lower sensor is like 70% less snowdrift. So it's telling you that the fence is actually decreasing the amount of blowing snow that's happening. And then the question would be, how does that translate to like a snow depth on that slope? And that's probably the tougher question. And with this type of winter, you didn't really get good data just because the snow would accumulate and then it would melt. And so we didn't really got a lot of snow depth out there. So it was a very low risk year for avalanches. The other thing for my instrumentation is this thing called Oscar, which is my open snowflake camera for research and education. And this is like my home built instrument that actually takes pictures of the snowflakes and whatever's out there. And part of this was going to be a design test to see. I had two different configurations where I put the lights in different areas to see how it illuminate or get shadows of the snowflakes, which one works better. And so on the left, these are the pictures of the cameras in Blungavik. Once again, extremely scenic location to deploy instrumentation in. And the one on the left is basically projecting light out, and you're taking like a black photo where the snowflake would be white. It looks like what you would see with your eyes. And then on the left is one where the camera is looking at the light and you're imaging the shadow. And the question would be, what works better? And basically within 1 week, I found out that the one where you're imaging the shadows works a lot better. And so what we have on here are some pictures of the particles we were imaging. We've got rain, we've got basically drizzle, and we've got sleet. And the sleet is very, very common in Iceland. And while both cameras could image the larger particles, it turns out that these really, really small particles, which could be either like blowing snow or drizzle or small raindrops, those are much more easily to image, like looking at the shadow of the particles. So if we actually look at plots of like how many snowflakes and raindrops were there and how many and what sizes, the one basically bright colors mean more, and we're missing tons and tons of precipitation with the one design. So within 1 week, I already knew the answer, which is kind of crazy. And I attribute a lot of that to just how many different types of precipitation we got in such a short period of time in Iceland. Just to show off some other images, here's some examples of like pristine ice crystals. Hexagons are very common in the natural world. And then we've got snowflakes. And then what's interesting is in Iceland, hail is what we'd actually call grapple in the United States. This is like almost like those Dippin' Dots, if you're familiar with that ice cream. That's the Dippin' Dot ice cream. You can actually image those with either one of them. And we just got tons and tons of imagery. And so in summary, over the whole winter, the camera that looks at the shadow, the preliminary numbers is 20.7 million particles imaged over the course of the winter. The other one imaged 1.2 million particles. And that was with the light breaking for about 2 months. And so there was like an emergency mission over the holidays to get a new light to replace that. The largest snowflake we imaged was about 2 centimeters in diameter. And then inadvertently, I also discovered that my cameras can image bugs, which is very convenient because I was literally writing a proposal to like look at how we could use this for different things. I said, I think it could image bugs. And then as I was processing the data weeks ago, I'm like, holy crap, there's a bug. I already got the data to like help with this next proposal. And then so here's one of the largest snowflakes we imaged. These like those big fuzz balls that come down and hit you and make you all wet in the face. Húnslapadrífa is the Icelandic word for that. And so that worked out well. There's always room for improvement, and so the amount of wind-driven sleet and snow is just wild in this country, and this is what I was really looking for, because North Dakota, our snow tends to be very dry. We have the wind, but not with the quantity of like wet snow. And so I had placed the instruments in a way that would contribute to like, hopefully the best data when we had winds from the north, and that turned out to work out pretty well. I had 3D printed some lens hoods to improve the original design on the spot. And then when you had winds out of the north, the thing's coated in ice, but overall we're still able to get data. What was interesting with these southerly wind events that were quite common, not so good. And so then the cameras ended up completely blocked. And so for future winters, the plan is to add additional like heating to the front to try and get this to like come off on its own. It turned out like when I went out to the field site, I literally just like touched it and this thing just like sort of came off. It wouldn't take much heat, I think, to like just get this thing melting and coming off. So we'll try that out in the future. And so overall, how could these cameras be interesting? This is a lot more of just like seeing the what's going on in the office and how this could contribute to what they do. I think for forecasting, it could provide like automated ground truth, what's falling out of the sky. They rely on these snow observers across the country to document what's happening, both in terms of precipitation, what the slopes look like. people go to sleep, people have stuff they're doing, and so maybe this is a way that we could get data all the time and not have to rely on humans all the time. The problem is the power and maintenance needed for them. Can you put these instruments where they're like most needed? Like we really care about snow happening on the slope. Actually, to have a field site at that location is quite difficult. And so you probably have to take data in locations that aren't perfect, but maybe we could translate to what's happening at the slope. And then in the future, if they do get the radar installed, this would be great ground truth for looking at the radar data and seeing if we can come up with better precipitation estimates, which would basically be input into all their avalanche models. So what was life like? It's a snowfall setup. It was amazing. Like I don't know if I could ask for a better workplace to spend a year at. It was incredibly welcoming and active work environment. It's great being in a work environment where everyone's like active and going outside and they're kayaking, they're hiking, they're skiing. We have this thing called lake theming, which is like gymnastics, I guess, but we basically, they ring the bell and then we're out doing planks and like cramping my stomach muscles up and stuff, which is pretty incredible. We had this garage fest, we went around at everyone's house and socialized. We had this fire drill that reminded me of like the episode in Office Space where like the guy's like, oh, fire drill, and we're like literally exiting out of the building and like freezing drizzle. Felt like freezing drizzle. That was fun. I feel like that wouldn't happen in the United States. Climb out the metal ladder. We had a Christmas dinner in the office. I thought that was amazing. And all I could think of was like the emails going around my departments where it's like, we're not even allowed to like bring in outside food because of like liability and stuff. I like how things just sort of work here. Life in Westfjords was amazing. Like I was pretty confident that I was going to have a good time just because of like the work I was doing. I didn't realize how much there would be going on in the Westfjords. There's the University Center for Westfjords there. They had the School for International Training, where the students coming in and out, both at like graduate, undergraduate levels. You had this Marine Freshwater Research Institute. I ended up hanging out with a lot of their researchers. They had a lot of resources for like learning Icelandic, which my Icelandic is trash, but at least you felt like you're in a safe environment to screw it up. And so they had these gatherings where people practice Icelandic. We were having like these grammar like lessons, and there was like my level Icelandic, and then these grammar lunches were like way up here, but I was taking something away from that, which was nice. And then there was all sorts of like outside activities in Westfjords and East Dakota. There's this Pigeon International Film Festival that was amazing. We have this Aldray Festival coming up next week. Like there's still more stuff to come. There was all this art happening. There was like this vertical dance where it was like freezing cold, and this lady got up there and did like crazy stuff to like music. Filming. Hilda, which is like, it's a Finnish book originally, but it got translated to Icelandic and English. They're turning it into like a mini series, and so they're filming this all over town. So it's like, what's all the commotion outside the office? Oh, they're like filming. The guy's operating a crane on this boat. So look forward to that and whenever this gets on Netflix or whatever. And I had a lot of opportunities to do stuff like outside of my office. I gave a lunch seminar at the University Center. I ended up teaching climate modeling to some students for the SIT program, so that was fun. Interacted a lot with the students. One of them wanted to get more data analysis, and so he's back in the US now. And now he's learning about like Python program languages and stuff. And then since I brought in a 3D printer, we demonstrated 3D printing and how my silver cameras work during like this open house. Outside of work, I love nature. I love getting outside. And so I did a lot of biking. I did a lot of walking. I learned how to cross-country ski poorly. Saturday, I did my first race. I'm still here, so I survived. That was great. Like just a couple weeks ago, one of my work colleagues and I, we biked around the fjord, and there's always hot pots. And so we literally just biked and got in geothermal pools and kept biking, which amazing. Like you can't come up with like a better combination of activities to do. This picture here is Svalbard or something like that. It's this old farm road that like, this guy's like, I'm just going to build the road. You can't do anything about it. And now it's this amazing road for like 4x4 vehicles for people on bicycles. And you can only go on at certain times because if the tide's high, it's like underwater. So that's where you're entering the low area where you're on the rocks. Did a lot of exploring and photography. That's Dinyandi, that's the big waterfall I mentioned. I'm not even going to like tell you how many times I saw the aurora, but like I am going to be an aurora snob now. Like I've seen aurora in North Dakota, but like the aurora in Iceland in the middle of nowhere is just amazing. I was like, I think I was keeping track of how many days I saw the aurora to kind of brag to my professor friends back home. I lost track of about 24 days, and it's probably like more than double that. Went hiking, saw this cool thing with like super cool water turning into like frozen slush. That was pretty neat. It was like super blue. Saw different waterfalls. Just really amazing time. And then, oh yeah, there's the other country. And so since we were up in West Fjords, we didn't get down to Reykjavik too often, except for like reasons that the Fulbright group gave us, which was amazing. Like I did not anticipate like how much interaction would be between me and the other Fulbrighters and doing stuff down here. Every time I visited Reykjavik, I would run into a Fulbrighter, like on accident, like either on the street or like getting honked at from a car or whatever. I was like, what is this? Like, and the other thing is, like, you come down to Reykjavik, and it's like this feels like a different country from where I am in West Fjords. Where like the biggest news in West Fjords, we go to the grocery store, we see a new brand of potato chips or something. Like, oh, holy cow, we got something new up there. And you come down to Reykjavik, it's like, oh wow, it's like there's like a city in this stuff. And then we ran into Diego, the famous cat, on accident. Like, took a picture of him, and then my friend Ellen was like, oh, that's Diego. He's like literally a legend here. So yeah, I had a lot of fun. Iceland Airways was amazing for like liking music and stuff. It's a great time. But overall, this is just the beginning. And so given that the radar didn't get installed, given that I've learned stuff about the instruments, I think the plan is, if everything goes well, to leave the instruments for next winter. I really want to bring my 2 PhD students here because they helped me out a lot while I was gone, and so I got to figure that out. But if the stars come in alignment, the plan is probably visit in September with them and get the instruments ready for next season. We're also exploring other possible research avenues. There's a lot that goes into like, what are the weather patterns that like basically form the conditions necessary for like bad avalanche cycles. And it turns out that some of the work one of my PhD students that I've done in the past with like classifying these patterns, I think there's like some direction where we could come up with some like automated ways to do this with forecasts. I don't know, we've got to figure out how we can get that funded, but I think that's a possible avenue. Also, North Dakota is like sort of like the Icelandic capital of the United States. And so I spoke with the groups that run the Icelandic Festival in North Dakota. I'm going to give a talk on North Dakota versus Iceland weather, which would be a lot of fun. I didn't realize like what a talking point North Dakota would be while I was up there. Like just running into random people like, oh, North Dakota, do you know about the town of Mountain and all this stuff? It was pretty amazing. And I'll just keep practicing my Icelandic because I don't want to lose the little bit I've gained. So with that, I say thank you. There's so many people that's contributed to me being here. Ellen Bjorkus, who basically spearheaded this effort. She was a classmate of mine from undergrad. And when I visited the volcano a few years ago, she's like, hey, I think your research might have some appeal here. And that just led to this. And then another friend of mine, Brad, he reviewed my proposal. Then Yihan Chu, Musa Gjelstad from UND also looked at my proposals. All my grad students for supporting me while I was gone. 2 of them were teaching some of my classes while I was gone. So that was part of my like argument to the department is like, hey, my students will teach my classes while I'm gone, so it'll be okay that I'm away. My department for handling a lot of admin stuff while I was gone. Of course, the Fulbright Commission in Iceland. I didn't realize like what variability there is in like Fulbrights and depending on where you go. Like I've had colleagues go to other countries and the level of support they get is nowhere near what you provide here. And so you guys are rocking it. Just keep doing that. All this year's cohort, I did not like realize like how much like connectivity we would have, and that's been amazing. I hope we keep that in the future. Of course, everyone at the Icelandic Met Office, Harpa, who runs the office, does a really great job, and I feel like every single person I interacted with there like improved my experience in some way. And then Ingebjorg and Kittel, they're the ones that I'm renting the house from. I think they're a little nervous about me renting their house. They've never rented it for that long, and it worked out. And I hope they'll allow us to come back at some point in the future. And of course, Zoe for coming with, for taking a big leap of faith and like enjoying life in another country, and her mom for being okay with it. And with that, I leave Zoe's slide. She's going to exit the room now, but I had her make a slide just to talk about her experience, and I'll take questions. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We have time for a few questions. I want to remind those who are online to just write in the chat.
I saw
and we have a question from here.
Yep.
I think this is from Belinda.
Yeah.
She asked, might one of your PhD students be a good Fulbright candidate in the future?
I think that's why I would like to bring the two of them here this fall to see whether this is the type of place they'd like to be in, and then that's the starting point. That's how it started for me. I came to Iceland, I'm like, wow, this seems amazing, and here I am. And so maybe that same story can play out for them.
Okay, excellent. Any more questions? Well, I have one. I saw from your slide that you are leaving your instruments behind.
Yeah.
For the next winter, do you plan to then maybe even keep them there for a longer time and come regularly and see a project going on?
That would be ideal. I think we'll have to see. The key is, I think in Iceland you have a limited amount of people who can do everything, right? And so the office that I'm at is pretty small, and so I don't want my instruments to be like a liability where it's taking away from their normal duties. And so if my instruments can like stay up and running with like minimal maintenance, then I hope that could be a possibility. But I think there'll be like practical amounts of time that could be spent like maintaining them and stuff like that, because they have so much other stuff that they're doing.
Okay, excellent. We have another question here from the online audience. How do you think this experience will impact Zoe when she goes back home? So what has it given?
Well, Zoe left the room because she's shy, but actually, she's a lot less shy than when she came here. And I think if she's learned anything, if she can just go to a school where everything's taught in a different language and like thrive, she'll be able to conquer any sort of situation. So I think that that'll work out well. Also, you know, she's made these friends, and it turns out that people live in the mountainous area want to see like really flat areas. And so maybe we could do like an exchange where some of her friends come to our house, and we found out that her classmates really want to find out how good crumble cookie is. Also, they're really intrigued by Raising Cane's fried chicken, apparently. And so maybe they could come up to the Iceland Festival and we'll get them crumble cookie and figure out a place to get Raising Cane's or something, and it could be like a little student exchange or something. And I know Zoe wants to come back and visit, and so I'd like to get her up here during the summer, so she can see whales and stuff. So
Okay,
yeah.
excellent. Well, if there's not any more questions, I think it's time to, well, now you're ending your grant in a few weeks, and you will join the elite group of Fulbright Iceland alumni. And of course, you get a little present, so you get the Fulbright glass here from the commission. And a pin, Fulbright Iceland pin, so you could wear, you know, if you meet other Fulbrighters.
Put it in here so I don't lose it. Thank you so much.
Well, on that note, I want to thank the audiences, both in person and virtual, and I hope you enjoyed this talk as much as I did. And I'm sure that, yeah,
Yep.
you enjoyed your time. It
Very much
sounded
so.
like that. So you can see that this scholar probably definitely made an impact in those 8 months that he spent here. And it seems that both he and his hosts have benefited from this exchange. You will bring back some new perspectives to North Dakota. I
Definitely,
assume.
yeah.
I see that you've already been planning some talks there. So we just hope that this project will continue to thrive and, you know, bring more students and scholars here. So hopefully, hopefully you can invite some of your colleagues here to go and do some research back in the US. All right, so I want to thank you for applying to the Fulbright-NSF program and sharing your talents with us and friendship. So I want to ask for a little round of applause.
Thanks for coming. Safe flight if you're gonna come back wherever you are.
And I also want to thank again those who joined us virtually, and of course those who are in person. And before I sign off, I want to mention that we have 2 more Fulbright forums coming up in May. One featuring our Fulbright fellows or students on Monday, May 5th, and then the Fulbright scholars on Wednesday, May the 7th. So these are going to be interesting, and they will be, of course, be streamed on Zoom as well. So I hope you will join us then. Until next time. So
Thank you.
Thank you.